Good evening. I am 𝗨𝗀𝗀, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to another episode of One on One, where we bring to you some of the best minds in Trinidad and Tobago. Today, August the 12th, is a special day, and it's special because it officially marks the first 100 days that the United National Congress has been in government, following their resounding victory at the polls on August the 28th. On behalf of this platform, I would like to congratulate the Honorable Prime Minister, 𝗙𝗶𝗿𝗀𝘀 Senior Council, and her government for their outstanding leadership and performance over the last 100 days. Yesterday, at the Monday night report in 𝗙𝗶𝗿𝗀, the Prime Minister gave a very powerful, fiery, passionate, and visionary platform speech. I mean, that is really sincerely how I would describe that speech. And this morning, for the entire day, the whole country has been talking about the contents of that speech. Social media, in fact, has gone crazy, right? Certain clips of that speech have gone viral. And we felt on this program to really give that speech the justice it deserves. We are going to dedicate this program to viewing and discussing some of the key parts of that speech. So this program is going to be a little different from the normal format where we bring on panelists and it's basically an interview. We actually want to look at a few clips from that speech and then have an informed discussion on those clips. So what we will be doing is playing those clips, certain parts that I cut out that to me were very, very powerful. We'll be taking feedback from you, the viewers, as well as our esteemed panelists. And we are honored today to have with us veteran media personality, Ken Ali, and also the United National Congress Public Relations Officer and political analyst, Dr. Kirk Meighoo. Both of these gentlemen are legends in their own right. And I can say on behalf of my co-moderator and myself and the usual who are here on this platform that we are deeply honored to have them both with us tonight. Joining me, as always, is my regular co-host, agripreneur and director of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Donnie Rogers. I invite you guys to stay tuned as we will have a very exciting, informative, and engaging conversation tonight. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you, our viewers who are joining us on Zoom, social media, as well as members of the media who will be tuning in. And we are absolutely thrilled to have you all with us tonight as well. As always, as I say every week, we want to make this session as interactive as possible. So we encourage you to actively participate. Raise your hand if you want to make a contribution, or feel free to share your comments and questions on the chat. Sometimes the chats, they have a life of their own, and it's like a program, a different program by itself going on the chats. But, we encourage the collaboration. So without further ado, I want to pass the mic over to Donnie, who will say a few words, and then we will get straight into our discussion tonight. Donnie, over to you.
Okay, good night, 𝗨𝗀𝗀. Good night, Ken. Good night, Dr. Meighoo. It's a pleasure to be here again. Firstly, let me start by congratulating the Honorable Prime Minister and her team and her government for a very successful first 100 days in government. And I think when you look at the accomplishments in this first 100 days, comparatively, it surpasses any other administration. Last night, her speech was phenomenal. I will put our Prime Minister with the fortitude that Margaret Thatcher led with. And that is where she's at right now with me. The speech was so fiery, it was strong, it was impactful. And I think that is the kind of leadership that Trinidad and Tobago needs right now so critically because of the last 10 years of the former administration and where they have put us. My forte being in agriculture, we don't want to go down that road today, but where they have put us across sectors, it is really, we can't just find the words for that, So this is what we need. We need strong and decisive and impactful leadership. And the Prime Minister last night has solidified herself as being able to deliver just that. And as I said, to the level of Margaret Thatcher, the lady with the iron fist, that's how I feel. So over to you and our guest, Leisha.
Thank you, Donnie. So I would like to direct these questions to both our esteemed panelists, and then we will go into the clips. If you had to rate the first 100 days out of 10, what's the score and why? So that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, how do you think the public would grade the new administration? So Ken, maybe we could start off with you.
Well, good evening to you, Leisha. Good evening to my colleagues. Good evening to Dr. Meighoo and Donnie. And good evening to your many viewers. It's really an honor to be on your program. And I wish to commend you on the tremendous work you have done through the years in terms of getting public involvement in the national discussion. Well, 100 days have gone. I too was stunned by that speech. And in fact, I'll tell you this before I answer your question. I write a fair amount, and I didn't think I could go to bed until I wrote an analysis of what I heard. And that speech compared to what Dr. Williams did in the post-colonial period in which he spoke about nationhood and so on. There are several points she raised there about the banks, about the public sector and so on. But what struck me enormously is how she took the fight to what you call the fake elites with respect to the poor. And what we have witnessed in Trinidad and Tobago over the last decade, and the facts bear it out, is a widening divide between rich and poor. It probably is at a historic level. And there are elements of that. There have been studies. This is not just anecdotal and so on. There have been studies which indicate more and more people are getting poor because of the high cost of living and so on and so forth. And we've had a nutritional issue and so on. While that is happening, the rich has literally gotten richer. And there have been monopolies in this country. There was a time many years ago, Dr. Bego, may remember, when we talked about setting up a monopolies commission to prevent that. We have a monopoly in the importation of pharmaceuticals, as critical as that is. And by the way, that monopoly with respect to the importation of pharmaceuticals is run by the same company that runs fast food. And 7 out of 10 people in Trinidad and Tobago die of non-communicable diseases. So they go and eat the fast food, and then they rely on the pharmaceuticals that the same company bring in. So not only height of irony, but highly unethical. We had a monopoly in cement importation, or the Prime Minister just broke that, and so on. So all of those issues, the bank charges, I truly admired how she took on the issue of the banks. I remember in the Parliament, the opposition asking the previous Prime Minister about that, and he refused to step in. You remember that Mayor Motley in Barbados had told the banks, get your acts together or I will step in. And she did put the central bank in to regulate rates and so on. So I thought it was a most transformative speech by her, a landmark speech for that, and many other associated reasons which we could probably get into as the evening goes by. But as Leisha said, I would say it's difficult to rate in terms of, because a government is so many moving parts, so many. But if we acknowledge that the major issues in Trinidad and Tobago are national security and the state of the economy, I would think easily the government deserves at least an 8 for its enormous successes in low-hanging fruits, and one in terms of several things, like, for example, the signing of that deep water drilling agreement. We had ExxonMobil coming back here after more than 2 decades and so on. And there is seemingly a rich vein of seismic hydrocarbons in that area and so on. But in terms of the economy and in terms of crime, and, I wrote an article in the Sunshine newspaper this week in which I said, there's a prime minister who came in with a plan, and she really had a road-tested plan Kirk and others took it to the road for months, and they got people's views and they had all these discussions and so on. And so the manifestos as they were called, were the result of a lot of work in terms of engaging the population. It was distinct from the PNM, which had 2 manifestos, and I don't think they accomplished 25% of any of the proposals in their manifesto. So to sum up my view, I think it was a very good, it has been a very good start. The Prime Minister has indicated what are her priorities, and her priorities include and center around improving the quality of life of the small person. When I was heartened, for example, when she spoke about the state enterprises, and she said, by the way, there are 55 state enterprises in this country, 43 of them wholly owned, and then there's some majority owned and some minority owned and so on. And a lot of them are losing money. And why must the taxpayer pump money into that when she said we could put it into gate and we could put it into this and we could put it into that? She clearly has a plan, and we are seeing that plan being executed. So to sum up, I think the government is off to a flying start. And I think there was a part of your question, and what does the people think? I think a majority of people appreciate that. They are the minority opposition, and they're really the minority because even the opposition is split in many ways. But I think most people acknowledge that this is a government that's taken off from where it left in 2015. There's deja vu about all the things the Prime Minister had done, Children Life Fund and so on. The government revolves around the Honorable Prime Minister. Her persona is one of empathy, is one of caring, and so on. So I think a great start so far by the government and the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Ken. So just to repeat some of what Ken would have said, he described the Prime Minister's leadership as transformative. Right, this is a Prime Minister who came in with a plan. The government is off to a flying start, and he thinks that most people is happy with the direction the government is going in. I want to say I share all of those sentiments. I would like to now ask Dr. Meighoo these same questions. If you had to rate the first 100 days out of 10, what's the score and why? And how do you think the public would grade the new administration?
Well, good evening, Lisa. Good evening, Donnie, and your viewers. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me say that, well, I'm the PRO of the UNC, so there's no other answer I can give than 10 out of 10, right? So, so there's no other answer I can give, but it's not wrong. I do want to, like Ken, focus on the speech, certain aspects of it. It really shook up the country, and it shook up the fake elites, as she called them. It shook up town. I want to remind some of the older people and tell some of the younger people something that Lloyd Best used to say, one of our great intellectuals and a mentor of mine who I used to work with very closely. He used to say, when looking at the education system, for example, he said, you don't measure the failure of our education system by looking at those at the bottom who failed. It's those at the top who have failed, right? So we have produced all these so-called scholars and scholarship winners and these great intelligent people and engineers, and yet look at the state of our roads and bridges. I used to say when I used to lecture at UWI, right outside the engineering department, had flood every time it rained. The engineering department that produces the country's engineers. We produce all these so-called scholars who do not apply themselves to the problem. So, and the reason why I'm raising that is that what she has done is she has shaken up these elites who have used their position to rob this country for decades. There's a lot of taboo subjects she opened up. Open secrets that everybody knows. Rackets everywhere in Trinidad. That is the legacy of the PNM. Rackets in everything. From textbooks for children. They have rackets in textbooks. Anything you do in this country, a racket is going to form, especially when government does it. That's the way the PNM ran this country, and it was an open secret, and everybody just wanted their turn. They just wanted their turn at the racket. And what she did yesterday was she put a stick of dynamite, a nuclear bomb, in that. And then she said, people in her own party, I will bust your head. I'm not going to declare war. I will bust your head. And the crowd went wild. If you were there in person, they went wild when she said that. It touched something. Because everybody felt this, but no one said it. No one at that level. Yes, people in rum shops would say it. Yes, people, talking among themselves might say it. But at that level, on a platform, a prime minister, that was historic. It was groundbreaking. It shook, and it really shook everything up. So that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, just the pace of things that we have done in this government. It's incredible. And then today, of 100th day, ExxonMobil, right? They themselves said they do oil deals all around the world. They just finished some the other day in Azerbaijan and I think the UK, he said, and other places. Nowhere else in the world moved as fast as the 𝗨𝗶𝗿𝗀𝗵𝟐 government. We set a global benchmark. In the 1990s with the LNG, there was something called the Trinidad model because we had really innovated in the way we got the producers and consumers to work together and so forth. I won't get into all the technical details, but the way we structured that was innovative and people used it around the world. They called it the Trinidad model. And we kickstarted the global LNG industry in 1990. ExxonMobil was saying today that we set a global benchmark today. And then the Carney leases again. 200 leases today. You know what it's like? It's like someone found the on switch for Trinidad. And for 10 years, it was switched off. And it's like, why couldn't we do this in the past 10 years? All of a sudden, now, everything is up. The flooding, right? We had over 24 hours of rain straight. If this was the PNM, we would have had so much destruction, schools closed, people getting let out early, but we had very minimal disruption. The country is finally working again. People recognize this. They recognize. So when the tragedy of the young boy at the hospital, his death, she immediately called an investigation. You would have to look and chase Terrence Dale Singh or Keith Rowley, and then they would make up all kinds of excuses and deny and pass the buck down to somebody here and somebody there. That people recognize this is different. And final thing, this is 𝗨𝗏𝗀 2.0, as she said. 𝗨𝗏𝗀 2.0, and the country appreciates it. It's only some of the paid-for naysayers and bitter persons who are loud on social media, but nowhere else. Everybody realizes that even if they may have little grouses here, little complaints here, they realize that things have changed. We are finally, and we can see we are on the path to becoming a developed country.
Can I step in?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm finished.
Okay. Based on what Dr. Meighoo says, it got me thinking when he quoted Lloyd Best. And it was Lloyd Best who came up with the term literally decades ago, the validated elite. Subsequent to that, Mr. Pandey came up with the term parasitic oligarchy. Now, and this is what made the Prime Minister's speech and her policy initiative so far, because she has followed, I'm going to explore what both leaders said before. But let me say, I've talked about rock-hard cement coming in, and also there's a review of CDAP drugs, which is a significant. CDAP drugs cost taxpayers almost $1 billion a year. They recently had to dump $80 million worth. And there is a whole inefficiency in the formulary at NIPDEC and so on. But more than that, we have been buying on unnecessarily expensive drugs when generics are available at a quarter of the cost. And you have to ask why. Again, we go to the monopoly that controls the importation of pharmaceuticals. And this is what made the Honorable Prime Minister's statement last night and her policies that accompanied her, them and, well, preceded them. Years ago, Mr. Best identified the fact that to get transformative change, to get change in society, well, the World Bank came up with this term called state capture. What it meant is that a tiny elites captured the government in office, gave them perks and assistance. Look and ask yourself how the People's National Movement, which was $8 million in the red in 2015, would put up that Balize house, a sprawling complex, 5 stories high. That's from selling barbecue tickets and raffle
sugar
tickets.
cake.
On sugar cake, you
A
understand?
car raffle, they say.
We have to car raffles and so we have to ask all of those things. And Mr. Pandey spoke about the parasitic oligarchy, but the key point I'm making is, well, Mr. Best and Dr. Best never became a national leader. He wasn't able to exact policy. Mr. Pandey became, and he wasn't transformative, and we give him a lot of credit. I have enormous regard, like everybody else here. But the current Honorable Prime Minister, Ms. 𝗙𝗶𝗿𝘀𝘀, has not only spoken on it, but she has begun to revise the economy and to make it more egalitarian, to create more social equity. Look, for example, I'll give just one more example. The food import bill tops $8 billion a year now. When our Prime Minister demitted office in 2015, it was 4-point-something billion. The PNM government suppress the agricultural sector. We have over 7,000 acres of arable land, 77,000, sorry, acres of arable lands. Where are they now? A lot of them are being occupied by shopping malls, owned by whom? By franchise stores or fast food, owned by whom? While food production declined. CARICOM had a plan that they would set 25 by 25. They would decrease international import value by 25% by year 2025. The only country to achieve it is Guyana. Guyana is self-sufficient in food. We have the largest food import bill in the CARICOM, where we have idle arable lands that have been occupied by people who own the shopping malls and so on and so forth and so forth. And so some sprawling warehouses. There's a huge warehouse going up in the east on the right side of the highway there, and near Orange Grove and so on.
And Ken, if I may, that is not accidental. It is policy. It is purposeful. It is a racket. You know, when she mentioned the banking racket, a 1%er went in with a bank loan that Republic was guaranteeing, and then Republic would occupy the building and pay the rent to pay off that loan. For people in town, everybody knows those kind of things happen all the time, and she exposed it, that's all. But everybody who is in those circles knows that's how it goes, and
Kirk,
she's exposing it. So these food forces you're talking about have no problem getting foreign exchange to import watermelons. Yeah, go ahead,
Well,
Ken.
let's get back to the I'm glad we went to the commercial banks, because there's so much we could talk about. The commercial banks whose profits have doubled in Trinidad and Tobago. Everything I say here could be double-checked. Trinidad and Tobago is the only known country in which the banks made higher profits post-COVID-19. Because around the world, let's look at Britain, for example, the leaders there mandated the banks to give tax holidays, ease up mortgages, and so on during COVID when businesses were closed. Here, let me give you a good example. There is a grocery store in Trinidad and Tobago, which was not forced to close during COVID-19. And they went into all kinds of businesses that small business people are into. They're selling and they have a bakery, they have you name it. They have a butcher store, they have a stationery store, they're selling appliances. All that happened when COVID-19 took place and small businesses were forced to close. Their profits continue to leap. And I said this openly, the leadership of that organization has a long history with the P&M. Again, all of this could be validated. Over 6,000 small businesses closed post-COVID-19. The big businesses, the corporations, made larger and larger profits. When we look at, I don't want to call names of corporations here, but they're mostly family-owned, majority family-owned businesses. One, a huge one that continues to make a lot of money. The chairman of that is so close to Dr. Rowley. Dr. Rowley put him as the single prober, so-called prober, into the 𝗙𝗶𝗿𝗀 when there was a procurement issue with respect. So that's his partner. We put it this way. That was his part. While all of that, the wealth was concentrated more and more in the hands of a tiny minority, the small people getting, there were 5 fuel price increases. Cost of housing went up. Cost of food went up. I got a grocer to continuously send me an Excel chart which showed if you take any item, a pound of lentil, a pound of dal, and you would see the prices sliding up all the time, which meant a lot to the small people in the informal sector, those fellas selling doubles and so on in the street corner, had to curtail their activities because of crime and so on. Petrotrin shut down, sent over 5,000 workers, and impacted tens of thousands of people. You go into Marbella and Vista Bella and all that stretch, all kinds of, from tire shop and so on, closed down, and I could go on and on and on. And that is why all the good the Prime Minister has done, and she's done a lot. This, to me, is a signal development in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. I am proud beyond words to see this happen, because I have heard people going back to Lloyd Best, and Dr. Meighoo, you remember that? You're a Lloyd Best supporter, and so on. And he wrote about it, and he explained what and who is the validating elite. Mr. Pandey spoke about it at length. Ms. 𝗨𝗏𝗖'𝘀 has taken definitive action.
I would say, Ken, the bull by the horns there. So thank you both for that very enlightening contribution, but for putting into words maybe what many of us are feeling but cannot see, right? And well, Dr. Meighoo, getting back to some of these sentiments you would have raised, her speech yesterday, the Honorable Prime Minister's speech, it really shook up the country, shook up the faith elites. It switched on the country. You spoke about Kamala 2.0. Now I'm going to share a video, and as I said before, we'll be willing to take any questions, any comments. I pretty much would like to hear what you all have to say. But this particular part of the speech, let me just get the video ready. It struck me because we have always heard the Prime Minister's mantra of serve the people, serve the people, serve the people. And she would have reinforced that in this part of the speech. Also, she would have taken a very, very hard stand against corruption. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Just tell me if you're hearing the audio.
We are a government
Yeah.
that answers the phone, and I have a warning for any official of my government. You must give standardized service. MPs maintain weekly office hours. They conduct Saturday site visits. They utilize digital case tracking to ensure your issue doesn't get lost in a filing cabinet. We have already begun consultations and we'll continue. I've always told you, we listen and then we lead. We listen and then we lead. So whatever we do will be based on your feedback in our consultations. So our approach is national town halls are back. Listening before legislating. Town halls with you before Whitehall. That is my mantra. We will speak with you. Budget consultations, stand your ground consultations are ongoing. And tonight, I'm warning some persons. You know who you are. You're already cavorting with the same crooked contractors and lawyers and P&M financiers and corrupt fake elite. Get yourselves out of that now, because I will come for you. I'll come for you. I'll have the AG backing me up. I will come for you. Stop it. You have already forgotten the loyal rank and file UNC people who worked hard to put you in office. Remember that. Remember that. First, you keep doing that and try to facilitate their continued corruption. I warn you, and I am not afraid. I will fire you, and I will ensure you face the courts. I will ensure we cannot replace one corrupt bunch and then Trump and follow suit. And that's why I ask you to understand we cannot complain about the ghosts in the CPAP. And then you are on our throats. You just want to replace those ghosts with your ghosts. It can't work like that.
So, ladies and gentlemen, very, very, very powerful indeed, right? And here, the Honorable Prime Minister is speaking about the level of service that the public should expect from the members of Parliament and the government as a whole. Speaking about town halls are back, and that is her commitment to inclusive, consultative governance, something that has been long outstanding because people would have said the last government, the last administration, we couldn't talk. All of a sudden, people talking again. You know, everybody have an opinion. Everybody free to express their opinion.
I want to interject here.
Go ahead.
I've seen people complain on social media. The usual people, I won't name them. I say, oh, why isn't the government doing standard ground consultation? I see it's the UNC doing only for their people. Don't they care about other people? Now, and somebody answered, well, what prevents the P&M from carrying out their own consultations with their people? Absolutely nothing. When we were in opposition, we did that all the time. We went in every single constituency and consulted on the budget, consulted on issues. All the time we did that in opposition. The P&M never did that in government, and they will not do it in opposition. They want us to consult with their members, you know. And so yeah, so I just wanted to interject that there because it was relevant to what you were saying. So you can go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you for that, Dr. Meighoo. As I said, we're really going to have a conversation. Those of you all members of the audience, if you have some input or some question, feel free to raise your hand there because we're really just going through important parts of this speech and discussing it. Ken, would you have anything?
I think Curtis has something to say.
I think Curtis was clapping, giving his approval, right?
Oh, okay, my bad.
Could I wanted to speak about a matter that Dr. Meighoo touched on, the issue of flood mitigation. And he's so absolutely correct, and he contextualized it so well, that with all the heavy rains, we had no floods. And it strikes to a point, Mr. Pandey used to call it rural neglect. And I want to tie that into, I have met several people, all of whom said, I used to get water once a fortnight. Now we're getting water 5 days a week and so on. Several people. Now, what it has done is that it has made the supply of water more democratic. Right? There is this issue of rural neglect, so that certain areas got water. And that is one of the major achievements. Look also at the water treatment plant, which has to be taken out for service every so often. And the previous government, so culturally insensitive, would take it off close to Diwali time when people needed more water for obvious reasons. And this government said no.
Ken, I want to interject one. Not only the time when they did it, but also the length of time. It was like 24 hours, and not 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. You know, it's incredible. And we're kind of taking it for granted already, but we should remember where we were at. So you're right. Go ahead.
Yeah, and and there are so many anecdotes I could give similar to those. And that indicates why I say we have a transformative prime minister. And that permeates throughout all her officers, all her ministers and boards and so on. I like what I hear. I like what I hear with respect to the state enterprises. We have non-performing state enterprises, which are just living off the fat of taxpayers, and that money, as the Honorable Prime Minister says, could help poor people in this country. There are a lot of poor people in this country. The rich got richer, the poor got poorer. And so that reallocation of resources is critical to the governance and the faith that people put in this government and the Prime Minister in particular. She's an extremely she was full of empathy. That's the point I'm trying to make. And she shows that in every single thing. And these are some that Dr. Meighoo and I are talking about, are some manifestations of that. And it exists in so many fields. I've been extremely bothered by the rising cost of pharmaceuticals operated by one operator, and we have something called the Fair Trading Commission. And when you reach a certain threshold, they must step in and say, we're going to have a pharmaceutical a medicine that is used by poor and sick people essentially, and the prices went up and up. And that importer, that sole importer, runs some huge pharmacies across the country, strategically located, so they could squeeze other users. There are over 250 other pharmacies in the country. They could squeeze the supply and cause consumers to have to depend upon them. All of those things took place under the eyes of the previous administration. There's something called shrinkflation, which is something I take an issue in. And let me tell you, if you buy a bar of soap, you may find the price remains the same, but the size of it has gone down. Yeah. The Americans came up with the term shrinkflation. We've suffered from that. We have suffered from a lot of goods. They astutely, in a cunning way, reduced it a little bit, but we're paying the same price. So you find the bar soap finishing quickly. It is because they've kept the packaging a certain way. And so all of those are areas in which the poor man has suffered greatly over the last 10 years. And the Prime Minister is determined to reformat that and to put power in the hands of the ordinary people who backed her and put her into government.
Yeah. I'd like to interject and tie it in what you just said with what we were saying before. With commentary by Martin Daly, which I wrote a response to on behalf of the party, and it's about the validating elite. So he's going on about how there's no difference between BIM and BAM, and it was so distasteful. He does not understand, as you said, what it means to be scheduled for what once every 2 weeks, and then not even get it once every 2 weeks. WASA would never, ever dare do it in Westmoreland or Goodwood Park or Glencoe.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And where is the dam? Right there in Central. And those communities right by the dam, they're the ones scheduled for once every 2 weeks. And all the way up where they don't have dams in Westmoreland and so forth. WASA would never dare. That is a classic case of exploitation. And then he could go on and say there's no difference because he never had to face that. And this is and for anybody who says that there is no difference, they're clearly one of those elite, one of those validating elite who benefited from that old system, which the speech that the Prime Minister gave yesterday clearly indicated that we are ripping that down. She drew a line in the sand. And even in the party, anybody who thinks that old way of operating is that you still have to cuddle up to those same people, because in that system, as Mr. Pandey said, when the NAR came in, he thought people voted for change, but they got exchange. So we are not going for exchange. We are making real change. That's why the UNC was formed, and we are living up to our historical mission under 𝗙𝗶𝗿𝗀𝗵cie.
I just want to say, right, what you
Let
said.
me just add one thing here, Ken.
Certainly.
with regards to a topic that you just spoke about flooding, let me just say, and we spoke about the plan that the UNC had, and they came and they hit the ground running. Let me just clarify that in opposition, they were solving flooding, you know. If we remember, every time rain fall in Central, the Jerningham Junction Farmers Group, their lands would get flooded out. The then opposition MP, minister now, she solved that issue in opposition, you know, whilst in opposition. So the UNC has the capacity to do it. Thankfully, now they are in government, but the UNC has been solving flooding since in opposition. You know, so I just wanted to put that out there to you, Ken.
I want to say two things. Let me take up on that last point you made. People like the urban-centric people, maybe the Martin Dailies of this world, don't understand the stress you suffer when you face floods. You got livestock being destroyed, your home, your school books, your appliances, your agricultural produce, and so on, and then you don't get to have your home flooded is a pain that the person who, the urban-centric, privileged person, doesn't begin to understand. And all of that could have been remedied, and this Prime Minister and this government has indicated, has shown that in very quick time. But I want to go to another point, and Dr. Meighoo, I know you support me on this, is this matter of people like Martin Daly, the urban-centric native, the validating elites who remain the commentators in the newspapers. And that is one of the reasons why the newspapers are failing, because they don't represent the hurt of the average person. They don't hear the average person and the problems they face. You read those commentaries, I mean, they're not only boring, they're ill-suited to the average person in Trinidad and Tobago. They don't feel the hurt that people face sitting in traffic or home invasion.
Supporting you on the point, as you said, I mean, like Roy Mitchell, for example, I'm calling names. And so he, 2 weeks after the election, the next week, lamenting the loss of the PNM, was saying how he gave a plan to the PNM on what they could do. And this man is still a columnist, right? I remember in the 90s, at least the Express made an effort, and they put people like Anil Mahabir and Devant Maraj, and they were getting new voices that were traditionally suppressed by the mainstream media, and there was a dialogue, and then it closed up again. I don't know if the mainstream media is going to open up again. But you know, as it was especially if you are an Indo-Trinidadian or a former UNC, and all of a sudden didn't like 𝗨𝗏𝗄𝗏, you were guaranteed a column, you were guaranteed a weekly space. I hope the media will understand that the voices need to change, as you're talking about there.
Yeah, I don't know if they appreciate that, but they're dying, they're falling on their own swords. They continue to suffer huge losses. We call it names. Newsday is in a very perilous position. The Express is not doing very well. The Barbadian owners deeply concerned. The Guardian is being maintained because the 65 companies are mandated to put advertising in there.
And one other thing I have to say, they lost $8 million, and they themselves said because the PNM went out of office and they lost advertising revenue.
I don't know if 2 out of 3 of those newspapers will be with us certainly in a decade's time. All right, maybe the Guardian would stay because they use that as a loss leader. They use that to leverage political power and so on and so forth. The Express is in a bad way. And no, people really are relying a lot on social media. We understand that, but I don't think they're making an effort. And the most glaring example of that is what passes for commentary. I was a young person when I saw vigorous comments, well-researched comments, and you don't have to agree with the person, you know, but you know they put research into it. You know, it makes sense. You know, there are all kinds of prejudices that are displayed all the time, you know, and they were very ill-informed and so on. The newspapers are at their weakest, and take it from me, who've been in the industry for a long time. I've never seen them weaker than this, and they're aimless, driftless, not making an effort, and not appreciating the average person in Trinidad. We're a small society, and they have not made an effort to understand and to represent the views, the hurts, the opinions, the challenges of the broad masses in this country.
Right. So we have two members of the audience who have been waiting. Trini, you could go first, and then Curtis.
I
Unmute
am,
and make a contribution.
yeah, I am going to say though, guys, please keep it short because we still have a lot that we want to get into.
Yeah.
So Trini, you could go ahead and unmute and, go ahead.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and your listening audience. Very interesting discussion. I want to take us back to where we started at the beginning about analyzing the Honorable 𝗨𝗶𝗿𝗀𝗀's government's performance for the 100 days and her attitude and disposition towards taking Trinidad and Tobago forward. Now, if we remember our history, when Kamala came into government in 2010, her intention was always exactly what it is today. But her progress was stymied back in 2014 by whatever happened within her government and outside that caused her to lose government. If you look at 𝗨𝗶𝗿𝗀𝗀's history, she has always been throughout her lifetime in school and in her career. And when she made her speech, her last speech in Aranguez, when she spoke about her life and where she came from, she gave us exactly what her intentions were to succeed. And she tried to succeed between 2010 and 2015. And failure, she doesn't know what that means. So when she is back now, Kamala 2.0, she is here to finish what she started. And she always believed in education and upliftment of the less vulnerable in society. And my favorite quote, the level of success in a society is a measure of the comfort of the vulnerable in society, not the most affluent, as most people like to think. We always measure people and success by best, and we never look at the masses, the larger numbers who are in the minority and the vulnerable. And 𝗨𝗶𝗿𝗀𝗀 thinks about the larger numbers who are the vulnerable and the less fortunate in society. And she wants to uplift, she always wanted to uplift that because that is where she came from. And that's the difference between the governance between 𝗨𝗶𝗿𝗀𝗀 and the PNM. The PNM came from the elites. And the 30 years of governance that the PNM had, it was neo-colonialism that we had. It was just a replacement of the colonials who were here, who were there to plunder and fix themselves, because that is what the colonialists did. Kamala and came in to government through opposition, and her premise was always to look after the less vulnerable and have holistic development of Trinidad and Tobago. That's why she always keeps talking about there's a country west and south of the lighthouse. That's why she said it a million times during her preamble before elections as in opposition. She said it a million times while she was in government the first time in Kamala 1.0. And she is committed to that, and she does not know what failure means.
All right, Trini, I just want to stop you there because, we want to give other people a chance, right? But thank you so much for that contribution. I will ask Ken and Dr. Meighoo if they would like to comment on it. Thank you.
Yeah, just briefly for me, I endorse what Trini to the bone said. And the point he is making, which I strongly endorse, is that the Honorable Prime Minister is a product of her worldview and is where she came from and her humble upbringing, and she speaks to it all the time. She speaks to it, and every leader is that. And Dr. Williams brought his past in, his challenges with the colonial authorities and so on, his curacy past and so on and so on. Most leaders are that. But the Honorable Prime Minister, in a vivid, lively and real way, lives and espouses who she is and what she came from. So she puts emphasis on helping the vulnerable, on education and so on. And she has remained rooted. She has remained rooted through all that she has done. So I thought Trinity DeBone made a wonderful contribution.
I want to offer a contrary view, because the PNM actually don't come from a particularly more privileged background. Many of the PNM people do come from very poor backgrounds, deprived backgrounds, and they also faced whatever challenges to reach where they did. There's a crucial difference, though. There's an old colonial mindset where once you escape, you look down on where you came from, right? And we all know plenty of people like that, perhaps even in our families, who get to move to 𝗨𝗖'𝘀 or West Moorings or whatever, but they're from 𝗨𝗶𝗿𝗀𝗵 Trace or from wherever they are, and they never go back. They look down on them. They are, in fact, the most denigrating of that background. And whereas 𝗙𝗵𝗿𝗀𝗵𝗀 was always proud and unashamed that that's where she came from. She was not going to pretend that she did not come from selling bhaji in the penal market or selling roti. She was not going to be shamed by that and pretend that she's something that she's not. And this is one of the really authentic traits about the UNC, which I love and which I constantly try to promote as PRO in my capacity wherever I can, is embracing of the past. I think too many of our people adopt that colonial thing, which Naipaul used to write about all the time, or people who are ashamed of who they are and where they come from and tell lies and pretend and hide and all sorts of things to pretend that they are something higher than they are, and they end up embarrassing themselves, right? And that's what the PNM represents, because we all come from the same poverty and humble beginnings, but some people want to pretend that they didn't, and other people are proud. That is our story. That's where we came from, and we don't look down on others. We want to bring everybody up, and that's what the UNC stands for.
Yeah, Kirk, let me engage you there, and we're saying the same thing, because we're speaking about the rootedness. So rootedness, you said she's authentic, and I like your word, and so on. But I just had me smiling when you invoked Naipaul, and I'm glad you did. And I know you have, Alicia, I know you have a lot of youth viewers here, and I want to encourage them. I always encourage people, go and read Naipaul, because what Naipaul wrote in the 50s, well, in the late 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, are so relevant. And as you talk there, Kirk, and you talk about what Naipaul wrote, and so it reminds me of several of his writing, including the mystic Marcia. And when this ordinary fellow from Central got in and started to go to the cocktail parties in Port of Spain and so on, in one of the cocktail parties, he said, I really don't understand this etiquette business, Yeah. So, you remember that? So, Naipaul captured it. Yes. The Trinidad and Tobago he left behind years ago, that dichotomy still remains. So, yes, I share that. We're saying the same thing, that she has remained rooted, and that influences policy. That influences program, that influences who she is and a personality as a national leader.
Yeah, because it's a sick mentality. You know what it's like? It's like an abuser, someone who grew up abused and then goes on to abuse others, right? That's the PNM mentality. Sadly, they may have grown up sort of degraded and embarrassed and ashamed, and then when they reach those positions, they do the same thing to others. right? And they continue. That's the neo-colonial part of it. That's the colonial part of it. Reinforcing those attitudes, that hierarchy, and what the UNC has always represented. That's why Pandey. So for those of you who don't know the history of the UNC and ULF before, Pandey in 1976 he put an illiterate cane farmer woman as a senator,
Dora
Bridge-Mohan.
Bridge-Mohan.
Yes, to show that no, it's not supposed to be people from Glencoe and West Moorings. Only that's supposed to be in the Senate, and they wear their shirt jack. This is where we come from. This is our roots, and we must always stick to it.
And Dr. Meighoo and Leisha, indulge me while I make this point. I'm glad you I wrote about this also, and I quoted Dora Bridge-Mohan. When independent Senator Vieira came and sections of the media were saying how you could attack independence, he came and joined the dance. He is a democracy is a noisy place. We have a lot of contrary views and so on. You must be able to engage. Dr. Williams criticized the independent senators. He said they were anti-progress. A lot of them were anti-progress. Who does Vieira represent? And Lloyd Best used to say, Kirk, you remember when Lloyd Best said we need a big Mako Senate?
Yeah, a Mako
and
Senate.
Meant is put farmers there, put seamstresses there, put taxi drivers, let them represent the soul of the nation. And what is Vieira?
Let me tell you something Lloyd Best told me. He said he was asked to be an independent senator, and he said, I'm not independent, I'm Tapia.
Yeah.
He stands for something.
I felt very sore about that issue with Vieira, and I came down and I wrote, you're in the Senate, you're in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, you must be able to take the heat. You must be able to take criticism once it's well-founded and not personal attacks and so on. I'm not suggesting personal attacks and so on. But the elites in the media rushed to his defense and so we could attack the man and so on. And I said, I went and researched it. Dr. Williams used to attack the independent and said, who voted for you? And they said,
Keith Rowley attacked the independents. Yeah. Just keep, you don't have to go as far as Eric Williams, but nobody said anything when he did it.
Who voted for Vieira and what does he represent? Who does he represent? And I'm hoping that when there's a change of president, as there will be in 3-4 years time, and there's a new head of state comes in, that we would have among the 9 independents people who represent the soul and the essence of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And Kirk, I'm glad you brought up Dora Bridge-Mohan, and she made some valuable contributions. She wasn't articulate with her language and all that, but she spoke as a cane cutter. She was a cane cutter from Endeavour area there and so on. And she represented the people. And Mr. Pandey made the parliament relevant to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So I think this is also a crucial issue, Leisha, as we talk about the last 100 days. This is one of the issues that came up. And I feel strongly on the issue of Vieira and so on. But they represent the old order. They represent what the Prime Minister calls the fake elite. And it takes a long time because they own the institutions of state. They own media, they own big business, they operate at the Chamber of Commerce and the country club and go to the privileged schools and so on. Breaking that order is a lifelong thing. And Mr. Pandey, when he got in the government, realized how difficult it was. And then people say he started to go down the island, sailing with them and playing golf and so on. Our Prime Minister is determined to break that. And that is why I have no end of respect for what she's doing.
Ken, well, I think there are some comments on social media, and I would like to say good evening to our social media viewers. I'm seeing people are locked on from Malabar, Sandy Grande, Cunupia, 𝗨𝗏𝗂, Miami. We do have an international audience. Thank you guys for connecting. But Ken, what I was going to point out is that I'm seeing a few comments on social media that you are saying. Right? Somebody has said here that there is no such thing as an independent media, right? It is asking, this person is asking for more utilization of social media to get the government's message out, right? Okay, so those are the kinds of comments I am seeing on social media. So
I'm agreeing. Let me give a brief comment before Dr. Meighoo steps in. I totally agree. And in fact, social media has turned legacy media on its head. Legacy media is less influential. Long time, people depended on legacy media, traditional media, to drive the issues. Now social media drives the issues, and what is in social
All right.
media now is what's going to make the news tomorrow. And that is how it should be, because everybody is a publisher. If I feel strongly on the issue, like I felt strongly 10 o'clock last night, I went on and write. And if you agree with me, say yes. If you don't agree, say no. And we carry. Social media is continuing to and will continue to. But I'm also saying traditional media bought it on themselves and Trinidad and Tobago. If they're in that state, they buy a lot of that and bought a lot of that on themselves.
I just want to make a quick intervention here and honor Ken Ali's background with papers like The Mirror. For those older persons watching, before the age of social media, there were the weeklies, The Bomb and The Mirror, and they were the voices of the people who were excluded in the traditional media. And people like Ken Ali, Keith Shepard, Flags, if older people would remember these names, they were, they used to represent the people's voices, and now social media has amplified that a thousandfold. And that's how we in the UNC won government, because we dominated social media. Because the media were against us, as they always have been against the UNC. They always have been, and against the ULF as well. But we leveraged social media and attacked traditional media and offered our own true narrative to the one that they were offering. And we will continue to do so as it is now, because the deep state still exists.
Yes, I like the term. The deep states still exist, indeed. One of the books I read some time ago is from the guy who did the IT work and the early social media work. It was pretty early then for Barack Obama. And he explained that was a major anchor in Obama as a real outlier. This man was a one-term senator in Illinois. He wasn't even in Washington and so on, and he became a two-term president. And he explained how they took the issues, spin it on their head, they won't go to sleep until they responded effectively and so on. And I've told Kirk this privately, and I said it publicly. I thought the communication that led to the victory in April 28th was extraordinarily good. And they dictated the narrative. And I know the viewer has made that point, but it is continuing to evolve, and social media will continue to. If you have good content, it is quality content and well researched and so on, people gravitate around you, and traditional media will go the way of all flesh.
Okay, guys, I just want to do a quick time check. It is 10 minutes past 9. We normally end around 9:30. I mean, I did about 6 clips for us to discuss. Notice we've only gotten through one, right? But the conversation has been so lively. I do want to play at least one more clip though. And this clip has to do with the restructuring of URP. That has been a topic of national discussion, as well as the Prime Minister would have been highly criticized for her comment describing Trinidad and Tobago as a nation of grass cutters. So if you all will indulge me, I will just play this clip and we will take a few comments on it.
And humane, immediate cushioning we will provide. We'll fast-track eligibility for social assistance grants and temporary wage support. We must build bridges back.
Sorry about that. I'm going to replay that clip.
Reform has real human costs. I will not pretend this is painless, and I will not leave you to carry it alone. The purpose is clear. We must end state-sponsored criminality. We must rebuild and provide sustainable, dignified work with good wages. We must protect the many from the few who profit from chaos. In URP, we have suspended offenders. We have implemented new oversight and tightened protocols to ensure that the program remains honest. Our approach is practical and humane. Immediate cushioning we will provide. We'll fast-track eligibility for social assistance grants and temporary wage support. We must build bridges back to work. There must be priority placement into public and private jobs and training to upgrade skills or start small businesses. We must reorganize. That is a cleanup. We must have reorganized programs. There must be merit and not muscle. There must be community value, not political patronage. We must have transparent rosters and audits of all these programs that each can have equal benefits. That is this cleanup. Short-term hardship, maybe, but we must do it to prevent long-term harm. We must provide a clear path back to safety, to fairness, to dignity for honest workers. I make no apology for saying we have become a nation of grass cutters. Some people became upset about that. But the people are shouting the loudest. Ask them if they will send their child to cut grass. Ask them if they want their grandchildren cutting grass. And that is what we in the UNC is about, to provide honest, sustainable work for as many as we can. Barry mentioned the internship we are doing for hundreds of students through the state enterprise, TSTT. My vision is that every one of these enterprises, including the private sector businesses, should bring in our young ones for internships during the vacation when they're home for months. So they will know what is work, they'll know what is discipline, and above all, they will have hope for a better life when they graduate.
Okay, so again, extremely powerful. The Honorable Prime Minister speaking about putting an end to what she calls state-sponsored criminality and expressing her vision for dignified work with good wages. And that ties in with what we've been talking about, uplifting the vulnerable. And she
Yeah, I want to say, I want to use an analogy. Like, so if you've ever gone to the grocery and you pick up a little thing here and a little thing there and a little thing there, and when you reach the cashier is like $1,000, $500, and you have to put something back, and you didn't realize all those little things added up. What I want to put the analogy for, we spent over $500 billion under the PNM on things like URP and CPAP, billions of dollars. As the Prime Minister said in his speech, billions of dollars paving roads. And look at the state of our roads. Billions of dollars in CPAP. And what has that done? You know, in 1962, we had a higher GDP per capita. For those viewers that don't know what that is, that means your economy produced that much more per person. So that's like the income. So we had a higher GDP per capita than Japan, than Greece, than Spain, than Portugal, than Singapore, than Kuwait, than a whole set of countries that you'd never believe, right, and that are so far ahead of it. And for 20 years, from 1960 to 1980, we had the same GDP per capita, the same income as Singapore and Hong Kong. But then we fell in the 80s, and those countries kept rising. And we didn't reach back until the year 2000. We wasted 20 years. And that's what happened. In 2014, we reached the highest ever in our country, and then we just went down since then. And so it's going to take us many years to get back to where we were in 2014. I don't know if it's going to be 2030 or from before to reach back where we were there. We keep going backwards under the PNM. But we spend billions and billions of dollars on things like CPEP and URP. What 𝗙𝗏𝗄𝗖'𝘀 is saying is let's step back, think, why are we spending billions on CPEP and having this result? Right? What we need to do is when we spend that money, what is the result for the people? Not generations of people cutting grass or working in URP. Right? These people must be moving ahead. The internships for private companies and state companies. My son is actually doing an internship with a private company now, which is it's such an he's a presentation college student, and so a few people have that opportunity. If every student had that opportunity, so like the 600 at TSATV, they'll start to think about the world of work. They'll move ahead. This is the vision of 𝗙𝗏𝗄𝗖'𝘀, not just shelling out money all the time, people clocking in at 8, clocking out at 10, collecting their state, and then we just stagnate while the rest of the world progresses. No, we all must we must think about how we're spending and think about progressing. That's what 𝗙𝗏𝗄𝗖'𝘀 talked about yesterday. That's what she's about. That's what the UNC is about.
I just want to speak a bit about the ghost gang racket. And that has been endemic in these Meighoo programs. While Dr. Meighoo was speaking, I pulled up an article I wrote on Facebook, July 12th. Headline, Inside URP's $150 million ghost racket. And let me read just the first few paragraphs. And I have a document here, which I also found. A well-known radio personality, radio political propagandist for the PNM, has been on the payroll of the URP for more than 5 years at $9,220 a month. Her job title is Special Projects Coordinator. She has never reported to work. The tea lady at a primary PNM office, and I could say what office it is, Balize House, because I'm going to show the document just now, is paid $4,140 a month as a URP material supervisor, but has never done any such duties. And I go on to list a whole lot. Look at this document from which I sourced that information. It's available. I could call the name. I'll call the name of the PNM a radio person. Sharon Felix is her name. She was a special projects coordinator, $9,220 a month, and so on. And this is part of what existed. This is taxpayers' money, and it went on and on, $150 million in this period. So that has been a huge part of the wastage of taxpayers' dollars by, I'm not saying that Ms. Felix was involved in any ghost activity, but there are operators who put people's names on, ask for their ID cards and so on, and they run a huge racket. They give you a little change at the end of the fortnight and so on. And the PNM permitted that to continue. So apart from the larger issue that Dr. Meighoo speaks about, that we have an economy in which the PNM government has permitted and all these make work programs, and then you extend beyond that and you talk about the Civilian Conservation Corps. That's for people youths who fell out of the system, really, to give them a little change, to stay involved and so on. They're not involved in meaningful activity. They're not developing career skills. They're not going to contribute in a healthy way to the growth of the nation, and the PNM perpetuated that for so many years. And the heart and soul of that racket is in URP, and I have a whole range, and that's just only for a period, and you have the CPEP issue and so on. And the Prime Minister, I listened to her carefully last night, and she said, we're going to break all of this thing and get them into healthy, progressive pursuits. It's taken a little while the grass is growing, the horse is starving, and I guess the grass is growing literally. But all of that will be resolved in very quick time, and she will redress all of this and create meaningful opportunities for the working class in the country.
I want to intervene about the grass is growing. CPEP, as Minister Khadija Amin pointed out recently, is doing the work that local governments should be doing, right? Patrick Manning created these so-called special purpose companies and CPEP to do work. So he created educational facilities company to do work that the Ministry of Education is supposed to do. He created the road paving company for what the Ministry of Works is supposed to do. And why? Because they put contract workers there. They weren't governed by the public service regulations where you have to hire and fire and procure. So they could spend all that gas and oil money, huge money that we got in the 2000s, and they gave it to gangs. That's what they did. Community leaders. Mark Guerra, a notorious gang leader, was the Prime Minister's special advisor to URP. Right? Remember you had what's his name? Cedric Berkey, right?
Berkey.
Right? So and he was everywhere. This is what the PNM were doing. And so what they did is that they diverted the money. So local government should be clear. So they moved the money from local government to CPEP and funding these criminal gangs. But local government is the one that's supposed to be dealing with that. The Ministry of Works is supposed to be dealing with other things. So we need to make sure the institutions work and are not undermined by these corrupt institutions that Patrick Manning had put in specifically to drain the money from the country. He stood up with the community leaders. For those of you old enough to remember when in 2003 when he started this thing. He had the community leaders, the gang leaders all behind him, and he calls them gangs. In the CPF, they are called. Don't we have anti-gang act? Isn't being in a gang against the law, right? But they are called gangs, right? I mean, how more transparent can you get? That's what we need to clean up the whole system. As 𝗙𝗶𝗿𝘀𝘁, our Prime Minister, said, in all good conscience, she cannot continue with those programs as they are presently structured. They were made for corruption. That's what they were made for. Made for dependency and made for corruption, and we must restructure them.
And they're tied into youth crime. They're directly tied in. Now, there is a report on crime, a voluminous report, which was commissioned by Ms. 𝗙𝗶𝗿𝘀𝘁 in her first term as Prime Minister. It was completed and handed into the Rowley administration, led by Professor Selwyn Ryan, the now deceased Professor Selwyn Ryan. The vice chair was Dr. Indira Ramprasad and so on. And one of the lines I always remember, and I quote it in my article, and they said that unless crime is dealt with through a holistic effort of developing the skills and education and a whole, that Laventille is a dagger aimed at the heart of Port-au-Spain. And that's exactly what happened. Port-au-Spain is a deserted city. The businesses are leaving and so on. And all of that is tied into the gang culture, and the gang culture feeds on the Meighoo programs and so on. So while the Prime Minister was talking, Dr. Rowley then was talking about crime is a public health issue, and he brought in the CARICOM leaders to talk about it and spend taxpayers' money and so on. He never begun to deal with it at the root level. And the irony is his Minister of National Security came from Laventille, was the representative of Laventille, and so on. They made no effort to deal with it. And our Prime Minister understands the rootedness of where the crime culture comes from. A large part that sustains that is this Meighoo program. And that is her clear determination to begin to deal with that. We've lost 10 crucial years by which, and the gang culture has expanded. Our porous borders have allowed guns and ammunition, and most importantly, Tren de Aragua. In 2020, CARICOM Secretariat employed a Canadian company to look at the issue of gangs in the Caribbean. And they said Tren de Aragua was coming through the porous borders, Erin and Cedros and Palo Seco and so on. And they were linking up with the local criminals and were doing mercenary acts. They were involved in contraband trade and bringing in drugs and so on. The Rowley government did nothing about that. A few months ago, when he got into office, some of them used Trinidad and Tobago as a jumping off base from which they traveled to the U.S. And you could easily Google this and find the facts. President Trump cracked down on Tren de Aragua, used an ancient legislation to called them terrorists and so on, and deported them. He deported some to El Salvador in that dreadful prison there and so on.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of them came via Trinidad and Tobago. No, Minister Roger Alexander had just branded them as terrorists and he's taken action. We lost 5 years in the fight against the Venezuelan gangsters, Tren de Aragua, who are tied into President Maduro. They're criminal mercenaries. Some come and put down hits here and they leave, they bring contraband goods and so on, and Trinidad and Tobago. And the reports stated that. They had reports that CARICOM paid for and so on. All of those things are intricately tied up, So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Okay, thank
You see, all these things really, when we discuss all these things that happen, from agriculture go right back to crime. It's political will, Ken. It boils down on political will, because these are guys who know better and just did not place any sort of care in putting policy in place. That is why, I mean, when you speak about agricultural production and stuff like that, and you relate the banking sector and COVID, it brings to mind some statistics I usually use. Our agricultural production, we are still 55% lower than pre-COVID levels, right? And that is why the prices are so high. So our agricultural output is 55% lower than pre-COVID levels, right? And the statistics are well published for the government, right? In this publication, the review of the economy that usually comes out with the budget package, when you take the information there and you dissect it, you will come up with these statistics, right? Our wholesale price index, which goes on to the retail prices, have increased commensuratively. Our prices are basically like 57% higher over the last 5 years, right? So whereas most economies have really, caught themselves and they have recovered after COVID, as large as we are and as resourceful as we are, because compared to other countries, we have a lot of money. Let's not play the fool with that. We have not put the proper things in place as it relates to our developmental policy. And that is why we are here, because of political will over the last 10 years. These fellows who were there before just did not want to do it. That is what it boils down.
And we must acknowledge all of that is tied in to those are unwritten policies. The fact that they suppressed the agricultural sector is because it was determined to allow their friends in the importation cartel to continue to import because they were tied in to the PNM. It is not by a whim or anything that I look at the annual reports too. I look at the agricultural sector and you see from legumes to this to that, not agriculture, like you, but I see it. They have declined in all kinds of areas. Kinds of areas. They've made no effort. Guyana is self-sufficient, or Guyana has land and so on. Other countries have made efforts. Little Barbados, so we're going to plant this, but we'll import that from Jamaica and that from St. Vincent and so on. We have not, because it is all a deliberate plan to empower the friends. And that, again, is what makes what the Prime Minister has said strategically important. It's a philosophical difference, what is happening. All of this is on a bed of trying to break what she calls the fake elite, who have hijacked the society for the betterment of themselves and the political masters.
Let me give an example with the agriculture sector.
Excuse me, before you go on, I'm going to have to take your leave. So I just want to say thank you for the discussion. I'm sorry I can't stay until the end, but it has been a pleasure, and I'll leave you all to carry on. It's been excellent, and you're doing a great job, and we are definitely headed in the right direction.
Thank you for being here, Kirk.
I think we're wrapping up shortly, aren't we?
Yes, definitely. We are wrapping up. I see 2 hands up, but guys, maybe we will keep those comments for another time. So let's wrap up. It's 9:30. I know these gentlemen are very busy. Do either one of you have any closing remarks for us at all?
You want me to go?
I
Well,
would just say quickly that the first 100 days were historic, and the next 100 days, as we've seen starting from today, are going to be even more historic. We've already started the next 100 days on an incredible footing, and so we have turned the corner. And as I said, it's like someone found the on switch to Trinidad and Tobago, and that switch is called the UNC and 𝗨𝗶𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗀 2.0.
Thank you, Dr. Meighoo. Mr. Ali, anything from you?
Yeah, I anticipate from what we've seen in the first 100 days that the Prime Minister would continue to restructure the society. It is a long job. It is not going to happen immediately. These are entrenched power brokers. They're well linked to all kinds of things, including the suppliers of foodstuff and pharmaceuticals and so on. But she has shown clear intent, and she has begun to do things. I'm really happy that, for example, that Rockhard has entered the cement field again, because Imbert chased them out with taxes upon taxes and duties and so on.
Yeah.
So I anticipate she will continue to do more of this work. I can't say how proud I am as a journalist and identifying throughout the many years with the working class causes. I started my career in the height of the movement by the trade unions. George Weeks was campaigning for the control of what he called the commanding heights of the economy. Texaco ran the refinery at Point-a-Pierre and so on, and Williams was forced to localize it, first with Trintoc and then later Petrotrin and so on. And I've seen all of that, Mr. Pandey's fight against State and Lyle for carry lands and so on, and so on. And we move from one extreme to another. I'm glad the narrative is coming back to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I feel extremely happy, buoyant, and very confident, and I look forward to the next 100 days.
Thank you, Ken Ali. Well, I just want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the both of you, UNC PRO, Dr. Kirk Meighoo, and veteran journalist Ken Ali. First time both of you all are on our platform, and
Yes.
hope to see you again. I know you're very busy, so hopefully there'll be another opportunity that you can come and grace us with your presence and share your knowledge. To our
Thank
audience,
you for having me. Thank you for having me.
you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Nice having you.
And to our audience on Zoom, social media, members of the media, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to join us next week for another episode of One on One. Keep safe and good night.